Reaction on Tony Blair's decision to take his country to war. Our Sarah Morice joins me now live from London. Sarah, we just saw Ammar in Baghdad. What's been the reaction in the UK then?
Well, there's been widespread condemnation here of the former Prime Minister, Tony Blair, who, of course, was the Prime Minister when the Iraq War was started and as it was going on. Now, his face graces the front pages of most of the major newspapers here today, who have not only decided to run this story on the front page, but most of them have dedicated 10 to 15 pages of coverage on this issue. So it really is a big deal. Now, if we start with the Sun newspaper, you can see Tony Blair here, and it says weapons of mass deception. Now, the Sun is claiming that Tony Blair led the public on a mass deception, that he sent the troops to war ill-equipped, and that he decided to go to war based on flawed intelligence. Now, of course, both of those arguments were criticisms put forward by the Chilcot report. If we move on to the Daily Mirror now, and it says, "I'll be with you whatever." Of course, this was the memo, or one of the memos, that Tony Blair sent to the then US President George W. Bush. Now, the paper goes on to call Tony Blair Bush's poodle and says that the pair were plotting to go to war 8 months before it was actually declared. Now, some of the papers also have a look at not just what came out in the Chilcot report, but how Tony Blair responded to it. And one of them is the Daily Telegraph. You'll see here it says, "I'd take the same decision." Now, this, of course, is in response to Tony Blair's response to the report. He gave an emotional and sometimes teary press conference yesterday where he admitted some mistakes were made and was sorry to the victims who got involved or who were involved, but said that if he had his time again, he certainly would do the same thing again. Now, if we move on to the Daily Mail, they had a look at the same issue, but they were scathing of Blair's response, saying a monster of delusion, and they say his deception really was a sign of sickening egotism. So we have to say that Tony Blair has not fared well out of this, and certainly doesn't leave his legacy looking too good.
Sarah, when you're looking at the headlines, I'm sure many of the papers would be pointing to people calling for Blair to be prosecuted, even tried for war crimes. In reality, how likely is that?
Well, there's a lot of debate over this, and you are right. There are some people calling for him to be prosecuted. We've got some of the relatives of the victims, but also some politicians. But a leading lawyer has come out this morning and said that he doesn't think it's actually a possibility based on the fact that what Tony Blair did wasn't a crime at the time. Now, there was a crime called the act of aggression, or crimes of aggression, which is what the Nazi leaders were prosecuted under. However, during 2003, when this war started, that legislation was suspended while international bodies were debating its definition, which means because it actually wasn't a law, so it wasn't illegal to do it, it means that they can't prosecute Blair now because you can't look retrospectively back at this law. But what we do know is that it has damaged his legacy. For a long time, Tony Blair was considered the poster boy of the Labor Party here. He won more Labor elections than any other Prime Minister. He was seen as a reformist. But for now, I think the Iraq War will just cast an extraordinarily long shadow over that legacy.
Yeah, it looks like the aftershocks will continue for some time. All right, Sarah Morice from London for us. Thank you.